Hi everyone, welcome to the Times Higher Education webinar, Elevating the Academic Experience for International Students with Inclusive Digital Resources, held in partnership with Perlego. My name is Ritu Sajeev. I'm the Deputy Editor for Branded Content at Times Higher Education. Our topic today really needs no introduction. International students face various challenges such as language barriers, financial constraints, and adjusting to unfamiliar models of teaching and learning. The popularity of online and distance education offers a promising solution to some of these problems, but standardizing the student experience remains a difficult task. In this webinar, we're going to focus on the challenges of accessibility faced by international students enrolled in UK universities, both within the UK and abroad. We have a great panel of experts joining us today who will share insights on this topic and the measures universities can take to mitigate these challenges. Before I introduce the panel, I would like to point out that there will be time for audience Q&A at the end of our session. If you'd like to ask a question to the panel, please use the Q&A function on your screen. A recording of this webinar and a post-event summary article will be sent to you after the session. Our panel today include Tom Bright, Director of Digital Student Experience at the University of Lincoln, Kate Borthwick, Director of Open Online Courses at the University of Southampton, Annabella Stover, Deputy Dean of Students at Dublin City University, and Catherine Templeton, Head of UK Partnerships at Perlego. To get started, Catherine, do you mind taking us through our topic today and provide a little bit of background on Perlego and the role of digital resources in improving access for international students?
Sure, thanks, Shruti. So my name is Catherine Templeton, so I head up UK partnerships at Perlego, and we partner with institutions as well as corporates to deliver inclusive access to online learning resources through a subscription-based platform. So working in a similar model to products like Spotify or Netflix. Similar to those services, we're delivering that same highly intuitive, personalized experience and providing unlimited access to not only core reading and reference resources, but also supporting around personal professional development titles. I've personally worked in higher education with higher education institutions for the last 20 years from a publishing, retail and edtech perspective, as well as seeing a lot of changes in the market in that time. I've had the pleasure of speaking with senior leaders across institutions globally and gaining some insight into some of their challenges. And at Perlego, we partner with institutions to deliver innovative projects and solutions that align with a number of key strategic goals that are consistent across UK universities at the moment. And international students is a real key focus with that at the moment.
Thank you, Catherine, for opening up our discussion. I'll invite the panel to build on that and talk about the barriers that international students face throughout their journey. As we know, accessibility is a multifaceted term. Accessibility challenges in higher education can manifest in various forms. We will explore a few of these, and let's start with technological accessibility. Tom, could you outline some of the technological barriers that international students face in accessing course materials, and also how online resources can alleviate their difficulties, especially if they're learning remotely or on a hybrid basis?
Yeah, we've done a fair amount of research into this with support from JISC. So yeah, I think there's a range of factors involved. When international students are actually here in the UK, they can find the complexity of what's on offer quite confusing, and they can struggle with the usability of systems. A lot of universities have disparate systems that do different things, and that can be quite difficult to navigate. The findings of our research flagged issues with Wi-Fi access. So often international students are arriving, they might not necessarily have Wi-Fi where they're living, so they struggle from that point of view. Some may have older devices and so may struggle to access things through those devices. And they find things that they can find challenging, things like multi-factor authentication, actually getting logged on and onto the platforms that we deliver. When it comes to students in their home countries pre-arrival, there can be issues there with authentication as well. If they've got an international phone number, that often doesn't work with authentication. There may be sort of issues with accessing things on app stores or through whatever firewalls countries might have, like in China. So there's a range of issues really that you're kind of looking to address. Do you want me to go on to how you might address those, or?
Yes, please.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, there's lots of different ways you can address those. One of the things we're looking at here is trying to simplify what we offer, so trying to create sort of one-stop shop access to the key resources that they need through an app that doesn't necessarily give them everything. So they may still have to go to the different platforms to access more detail, but at least it gives them the kind of key information that they need on a mobile device or whatever device they happen to have. So that's the key project that I've been working on over the last 6 to 8 months, developing that sort of one-stop shop app, but also making sure that it's accessible through other means. It's not just accessible through an app store. There are other things that you can do as well. So induction is key, trying to make sure that reality when they get here meets up with expectations. So we're also doing a lot of work around what we do pre-arrival, trying to make it clear to international students what to expect, what platforms we have here, what sort of technology we expect them to understand, and also providing more support and training around that, both pre-arrival and on arrival. So we've boosted the support that's available for students when they get here. So those are some of the things we've done, as well as providing things like additional laptops for people to pick up. And we're also, I think, looking at providing Wi-Fi dongles. I don't think we've quite got that set up yet, but those sort of simple solutions as well.
Thank you, Tom. Building on what Tom was talking about, and in terms of access to devices and stable internet connectivity, which is really important for remote learners especially, how can institutions address the digital divide while designing online and hybrid learning plans? Kate, what has been your experience as the director of open online courses at your university?
Hi, yeah, thank you. Yeah, I was just going to follow on actually from what Tom was saying about kind of the induction and the one-stop shop as well, just to kind of follow on there from what he was saying. Just to say, you know, what we also do similar things. And I think one of the things we do in terms of getting used to our systems and our processes is to do an online induction ahead of time before students come to our campus. And so they work through that. And that idea of, just seconding that idea of the one-stop shop and simplifying things so that there's a very clear process. I mean, I think it's actually useful for all of our students to have that simplification, but obviously it really helps with international students as well. And I think, so that idea of bringing that together, but also trying to do that and welcoming students kind of before they come, getting them to orientate around the systems and the campuses and the people they're going to meet is really key, I think, in getting to understand those systems and how they work. And certainly one of the other issues that I think we also find is not just the idea of the complexity of the systems and the usability, but it's also that sense of how they might be used and what the expectation is. And I think that's also part of induction and also part of getting used to kind of life at Southampton, but study in the UK. But that idea that, you know, international students may not just be expecting to use our systems in the way that we anticipate them to be used. And that's entirely just because they're coming from different educational backgrounds and different approaches. And so I think there's an element of this is functionally how our systems work, but also as part of our induction and part of the conversation that we would have with our students. It's and conceptually, this is the kind of thing that we're going to want you to do with them, engage with them in a certain way. These are our expectations. Those might be contributions, for example, in the discussion forum. It could even be as granular as putting your camera on or something like that during a webinar, during an online class. And also that level of engagement, what's the expectation going to be from them, but also what can they expect from teachers as well, in terms of how those digital resources are framed and things like that. So I think there's the technical side, there's also that kind of conceptual side, which links in to the pedagogy and having that completely into kind of an early induction, simplified, training at different points, understanding, and I think staff also understanding where those barriers are going to come in, is really crucial, I think, in helping to overcome those barriers.
Thank you, Kate. Annabella, would you like to share your thoughts on this?
I really just wanted to support colleagues here because it's something that we've encountered the last couple of years, and an affordance really of COVID to build on the work that we were doing around onboarding and pre-induction was really to help scaffold that journey. And I think we have a lot of assumptions around people and, you know, their technology competence. And, you know, I suppose we just really need to be mindful that, you know, obviously experiences differ in terms of even online learning versus in-person learning. So really just that readiness piece is hugely important. Spending time to really scaffold that journey for international students is incredibly useful. We have a MyDCU platform that students can access as point of acceptance. So again, just bringing them on this gentle journey, curated to different audiences, which again is really important because learners need to feel seen in this space. So again, just to support colleagues, it's good to hear that we're doing similar things.
Thank you. Speaking of navigating complex systems, another point I want to come to is international students often find themselves having to adapt to the built environment, navigating new physical spaces, as well as unfamiliar digital spaces and platforms. So what is the significance of adopting an all-in-one approach and making the necessary resources available in one platform to eliminate the need for students to jump from one platform to another? Catherine, could you share your perspectives on this, please?
Sure. Yeah, I think just echoing some of the other points around that that Arabella made around that assumption of sort of actually students' familiarity and their sort of digital natives, and they come onto higher education, and actually what they're faced with is quite often very different to what they're used to, and that sort of jump into and that transition into higher education and how you can support them by making it as intuitive as possible. I think what we've found a lot from talking to students is, you know, and why I suppose Perlego, we get such great feedback from our students, is it is a very intuitive platform that's more like the experience that they're used to outside of higher education. So it's more like that sort of Netflix, Spotify type experience. But I think what we find is it's also how it's embedded is really important, and how students, that journey that they make in terms of discovering that content and taking away those points and those barriers of entry, and just making it as streamlined as possible, because I think every barrier that you put up and everything that they have to log into to then get to that piece of content are those points of disengagement. And I think where you see those digital disengagement, it's sort of the leads onto that physical disengagement. You've got students who are so potentially time poor now, having to juggle working and studying, and actually how putting these barriers in can really can potentially impact on things like student mental well-being and things like that. So that sort of streamlining and making sure it's as seamless as possible to be able to discover this content and taking away those barriers, I think is a key area where we've been working a lot with institutions.
Thank you, Catherine. Tom, what is your opinion on this? Is this an effective approach in your opinion?
Yeah, as I said, we're looking at launching this app. We haven't actually quite, well, we've launched it just this week, so we don't have the evidence yet to indicate the success or otherwise of it, but certainly from our research that went into it, we did a lot of user testing. We're hearing exactly those things from focus groups and surveying, that just having that simple route in is exactly what students want and need. Yeah, like I said earlier, I mean, that you still have the in-depth information if they within the VLE or other systems, but if you've got that quick access to the key things like your next lecture, your attendance records, just the maps around campus to get how to get from A to B, just those helpful resources that you can just put on a phone, quick access. It's really helpful for students, and I'm hoping that as our app rolls out, it's going to be launched kind of initially just with a limited cohort, but we'll be launching it fully in the summer to students more widely. It'll become the sort of key university tool for students to use here. And it may be that some of the other applications we've got will be deprecated. So attendance logging, we're hoping, will eventually be done all entirely through the app. But, you know, for the moment, until we know the app is really working and does what it needs to do, we'll keep those things running in the background. But the goal is to simplify. The goal is to cut out applications if we can, and just make that infrastructure, the whole range of things that we offer students, a bit simpler, streamline, and avoid any duplication wherever we can.
Thank you. Coming back to the different challenges of accessibility, communication and linguistic accessibility is an important one for international students to be able to effectively participate in lectures, discussion, and learning activities. Kate, coming from your background in language and linguistics, do you witness language barriers affecting the use of online learning materials for students whose primary medium of communication is in English?
Yeah, I think this is really an interesting one. And I think there's a range of different challenges that obviously second language speakers have when they're engaging in person and obviously online as well. You know, they can be things like you know, engagement in an online space, for example, is typically often done through writing, through a chat or through a discussion forum, and obviously international students can have different levels of skills according to their spoken skills or their written skills. Producing written language introduces its own challenge because you have to think carefully about what you're going to write, and obviously it increases the anxiety around it because you want to get it right. You don't want to write a mistake, even into a small chat response. And so I think you've got that raising of anxiety levels. A lot of our online content is engaged with through the medium of writing. You know, and I think we don't necessarily consider that might be in itself significantly challenging for our international students. I mean, I think answers to this are thinking about different modalities in different ways, you know, producing teaching content in different modalities, and also multiple modalities. So for example, if you've recorded a lecture, you know, it should have subtitles and a slides or a transcript or something like that. I mean, certainly my own international students, when they see my recorded lectures, they work with the recording and with the slide deck, and they're using that as a resource to annotate, but they're also using it perhaps, you know, to engage with the content as well. So, you know, when you know, it's now possible to have voice discussion forums, voice feedback, and all those kind of things. But of course, those kind of modalities bring their own challenges too in the other way, because obviously you've then got to exercise your listening skills in order to understand what someone is either saying to you or putting across in a recording. And so there are real language, I think, challenges in the delivery of content. But I think in terms of a kind of professional services idea, you might think, in the way we frame our emails to our international students, the way we frame our instructions to our international students. And, you know, from, you know, I believe sort of clarity is best for everyone, no matter what their first language is. So this idea of sort of plain, clear, direct English, you know, surprisingly often jargon can slip in, you know, academic jargon of various kinds or idiomatic jargon. We do it naturally all of the time, and it's quite difficult to police that. But I think we do need to make an effort around that, and particularly when we, you know, we're talking about induction earlier, when we're setting up induction materials and the kind of instructional guidance on how to use the VLE and those kind of things, or even, you know, in the app, we use an app at Southampton as well. I think that, you know, we really need to pay attention to the language you're using, making sure it's clear, making sure it is jargon free. It doesn't hold assumptions about understanding about UK higher education that an international student just might not have, and that can affect everything, can't it? Enrollment, you know, how they engage with a library, what the expectation is in class. So I think it's just kind of being aware of that and being humble about it as well, that there might be mistakes that lead to misunderstandings, but there is a real necessity to learn from that and then tweak that so that that mistake is not perpetuated sort of year on year. So I think it just means a lot of paying attention to exactly how we're talking to our students and being aware that, you know, while we're looking at all of our students and we're thinking about inclusivity for everyone, there are issues that come on the back of being second language speaker.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Kate. Catherine, can I also get your thoughts on this? How important is it to provide access to inclusive digital resources and alternative formats such as audiobooks and transcripts, as Kate mentioned, to supplement the learning experience and integration of international students?
It's interesting. So we launched a read aloud function within the platform about nearly a year ago, and the way that it's been taken up has been just phenomenal, and it's meant that we've iterated on it and we've built it further. But you can see that about 33% more time is spent reading using this function, 20% more pages are read. And I think it's a tool that's being used. Okay, it's got great benefits for visually impaired students, but also it's being heavily used by international students as well. And actually, the way that people learn in different ways. And I think what Kate was saying, it's very true. It's not just international students that this is really important for. You see it across all students, but I think it's you can see how it's exacerbated, I suppose, by with international students, and we're working with institutions where we've built the platform very much with accessibility at the heart. Everything that we do is trying to create a really inclusive platform, and you can see the sort of how we get the feedback from the students of how beneficial that is.
Thank you, Catherine. Annabella, please share your thoughts on this.
I just wanted to come back to a point just about the onboarding process. And I think we may be looking at a lot of challenges, but I think what we tend to not look to what are the strengths that learners are bringing with them. So just in terms of the onboarding process, we've developed a series of self-assessment challenges that students will engage with. So really to start to reflect on where are they in terms of their own learning, where are their strengths, setting goals, the important things in terms of that reflecting on their own expectations and what they're hoping to get out of their program. And obviously that will differ depending, and that works across the entire student population really that are coming, whether they're undergrad, postgrad, online, international, that learning confidence and getting to know this learning environment that they're in is hugely important. So just that's something I think, just to shine a light on. It's just a really important part of the process, just to capture their level of strengths and confidence and where they're feeling confident. They will definitely have challenges. Everybody has challenges coming into something new. It's change, it's transition, but just to acknowledge that I think is important as well.
Thank you. Moving on to the role of digital platforms in fostering a sense of community and belonging, which is especially crucial for international students who may be studying remotely or from abroad. Annabella, I'll come back to you on this. Could you share some of the strategies you have adopted to improve engagement and the student experiences for learners who study virtually?
Yes, so I mentioned the fact that we have a pre-arrival piece, irrespective of whether they're studying remotely or online, but we have developed a series, so kind of 3 stages. So discovering DCU, so discovering the environment that they're coming directly into. We have a series of life skills courses then for the first 6 weeks for students, and then a community piece, which is hugely important. So whether they're doing an on-site or in-person orientation, or whether they're doing it online, we have developed this series of resources, and the community piece is hugely important, especially challenging for international students or students studying online. I think students studying online have a particular challenge in terms of creating those bonds, especially with cross-cultural differences. People are coming from different spaces, so it's really important that we give an opportunity for those linkages to happen. So some of the things we've done in terms of encouraging peer-to-peer supports during the orientation and onboarding process. But then we've done some digital badging. So we try to incentivize and gamify some of the onboarding activities so that there's an incentive for students to actually engage in the series of courses. And we try to pair the online or the asynchronous content with some hybrid content and hybrid workshops that they can engage with. And everything is at a point in time when they need it. That's really been the approach. But I think that belonging, and particularly for online students, where we know that we may have retention, attrition rates, those kinds of things, it's really important to scaffold those interventions and that process.
Thank you. Tom, could you also share your experience in addressing this issue? Perhaps could you share a few examples of initiatives you have implemented to improve the experience and integration of international students at your institution?
Yeah, and we don't have a huge number of online learners, international students doing online learning, but yeah, the numbers that we had on campus certainly shot up in the last few years. And we had to sort of, that was quite rapid, so we had to pivot quite quickly to address that and to make sure that they were getting the right student experience and as good a student experience as they should. I think there were a number of challenges with that. I think we were limited resources, like most universities. We're not flush with money, so just trying to make sure that we didn't lose sight of the UK home undergraduate students and didn't see their student experience slipping. That was kind of key. I think looking at the capability of staff as well, so certainly academic staff and professional service staff, to make sure that they were culturally aware, as well as up to speed with the sort of technologies that they needed to be using. So certainly from an academic point of view, making sure that our academic colleagues were confident and capable of using the Panopto AV recording tools, of creating sort of diverse resources around teaching and learning for different audiences. The points already touched on about making sure that things are pitched without using jargon, trying to make sure things are in plain English. Obviously with my background, which is a bit more on the sort of web and digital side of things, we've always had a focus on accessibility for disabled students, and that also benefits a wider cohort. So it's very, very true that if you focus on that, the usability of what you do, that has benefits for all students. So the other thing we've done is invest in a relatively small at the moment, but a user experience team at the institution, which we've not had before. So I've brought in a couple of staff with experience of user testing and just looking at that user experience across a range of, well, the focus is on digital, but that's not something we've had before. We've not really had that resource. So investing in things like that doesn't have to be a large investment, but that can really help turn that focus onto the user and make sure that what you're doing really does work for users, and that there's evidence that supports that, and that you're continuing to monitor and improve. It's an iterative process. So we're kind of starting that journey, and the app is part of that. But that's the broader piece of work, to make sure that everything we do is looks at user behaviour and responds to it and adapts to it as we go forward.
Thank you. Please go ahead, Catherine.
I just wanted to build on the points that you've mentioned, and actually thinking around inclusion maybe in a different way as well, in terms of the type of content and the type of sort of course design and curriculum design, and actually how it's so important for that to be inclusive too, and for students to recognise themselves in the resources that they're using. Birmingham Business School are doing some really innovative work here in terms of completely redesigning the way that they deliver their curriculum, the resources that they're using, the way that they're teaching, and involving students in that process as well, in terms of shaping to create a much more sort of diverse curriculum, not just that represents the student body, but also prepares their students for the global world that they're going to be going into. And I just wanted to bring that idea around that inclusive resources side from that perspective as well.
Thank you, Catherine. Kate, I'll come to you in just a second. Catherine, there's a question here for you. It says, you mentioned about display content and measure at which point do students disengage. Can you elaborate on this about best practice and how we can measure disengagement?
Sure. So I think one of, I suppose, where we see a lot of students coming to Perlego are the general route that they go to find content is they'll go to the library. They might not be able to have access to it there. Then they'll look for other resources. Maybe they'll search for a free PDF, and we'll be at that point where they can they quite often discover Perlego. So quite often we're engaging with students and understanding from their perspective sort of how they've come to find Perlego. And those quite often what we're hearing is those barriers to being able to access a piece of content, whether that's trying to find it within the university systems that they're not familiar with, having to log in numerous times to different systems, and then quite often being presented with maybe a static PDF or a piece of content that's not that intuitive. And then I suppose where we're seeing around the engagement data that we're able to see from our platform is actually how the students, when they're given a seamless experience into content and they're encouraged to discover other content that's relevant to them, you can see those reading times increase and the time that they're spending within the platform really increase. So we're able to see those points of sort of disengagement and engagement from that perspective. But I think from best practice point of view, from what we've seen, it's how can you embed within those systems of everywhere that a student might go, but make it as seamless as possible. So it's really easy to get to that content, and then using really intuitive platforms. And as Tom mentioned, around that sort of streamlining and trying to use, that streamline access to intuitive platforms that don't send students into having to navigate multiple different systems. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. I know we have drifted slightly, but Kate, please go ahead and share your insights.
Yeah, thanks. I was just going to come back actually on colleagues' previous answers, the previous question. But I'll say something about the monitoring as well, actually, in a second. I was just going to follow on from, I think, Catherine, you were talking about co-design with students and things in response to that last question about strategies to improve engagement. And I was just really going to say, yeah, I think in the learning design of online content of any kind that you're putting out there, obviously in the learning design, you can really work hard at community building in the types of activities you frame. And part of that is definitely inviting content contribution from your learners. Obviously, I do that in our open online course program all the time, but it's very much that sense of you're joining a learning community, and your voice is very much important to be heard in that community. So it's very much sort of going out and asking people to contribute back and share their own knowledge and experiences. And obviously co-design is an aspect of that going forward in terms of anything you're creating. Co-designing it with students so it's in the right space and it's talking to them in the right way and it's working in the way they want it to work. I think that's really essential. I just wanted to sort of add to that question really about disengagement. Just to say at Southampton, we obviously have an app, we have various tools, we have that complexity that Tom's mentioned in the beginning, but we're trying to streamline it as well. And one of the things we are streamlining is the kind of digital flags, if you like, that tell us if students are not engaging across a range of spaces. That might be the library, it might be through our VLE, it might be through recording their registration for a class, things like that. And then in a granular level within our VLE. And we have a team that look at that and a process by which that can be flagged to personal academic tutors who can then obviously make contact with the student and make sure everything's okay, talk through perhaps issues that they're having. And so I think that idea of using learning analytics and being alive to when disengagement is happening in different ways can really help students to succeed because it makes us all aware of it. And obviously we have a point of contact by which we can then go and talk to the student and see if they have any issues that need to be dealt with and that kind of thing. So it was sort of two responses to two questions.
Thank you. Yes, Tom, please go ahead.
Yes, the app that we're developing, the aim is for it to do exactly what Kate was describing, but also we're looking to build in sort of positive nudges as well, so to pick up on positive behaviour. So, for example, if a student has has a really good attendance record, just some messaging that kind of prompts them to keep that up, to sort of say, well done, you're doing really well. So it's a bit like the sort of digital badges approach, but it's sort of positive nudges when you're picking up on positive behaviour. So it's just the other side to that coin. And just the other thing I was going to throw in was about one of the things we picked up from talking to our students and surveying them was this need for students to interact and engage with each other. So as well as contributing, and the more they can do that, the better. It's about fostering that sense of belonging. And that's really important to the students. We've definitely picked up on frustration from some of our international students who started in the previous year about there wasn't enough opportunity to meet one another and to get to know each other. And often the students who are coming to us from overseas are actually older, they're mature students with experience. They often feel like they've got quite a lot to give and can contribute quite a lot. And if they don't get that opportunity, they can get quite frustrated. So alongside what we do digitally, it's kind of making sure that there's that sort of breadth of offering and giving them that sort of ability to contribute. It's really important to foster that sense of belonging.
That actually brings me to the next question I have. The next point I have is, which is maintaining the same level of academic quality and engagement in online learning as traditional learning formats, which is one of the challenges that we have to talk about. Can you talk about what the challenges are in standardizing the learning experience and ensuring consistency and quality in this context? Tom, I'll stay with you for a minute if you don't mind.
Sure, yeah, it's not necessarily my area of expertise, but one of the things we are looking at the moment is around academic offences and use of AI. So we know that's prevalent, and AI is not going away. It's how we enable use of that within boundaries and make sure students are aware of what they should and shouldn't be doing. So I think that's not just for international students, but for all students. That's a key issue. And it's about fostering that sense of understanding of what they should and shouldn't be doing. I'll probably leave it to other colleagues to address some of the other question, I think.
Thank you. How can universities leverage online resources and digital libraries to provide international students with access to the same educational materials and resources as their own campus counterparts, which brings us back to the title of the webinar itself. So would anyone on the panel like to jump in there and share their perspectives on this?
I can come in here. So this is an area where we work extensively with institutions, and just to use an example. So we're working with a leading UK institution, and one of the challenges they have is they have 12,000 UK home students and 12,000 international students, and they're wanting to deliver that consistent experience and unify that learning experience. And obviously with there's challenges around accesses that we've already spoken around actually being able to get into systems, being able to access the resources, publisher rights, geo restrictions, all of that sort of side of things. So it's one of those areas where we worked really closely with them to be able to, because of the way that our platform works, we can offer that access no matter where a student is. There are no geo restrictions within Perlego. So students get that consistent access to the resources. But another area here was more actually looking at inclusive resources and diversifying the reading lists to actually be able to not just deliver that access to all students, but to be able to deliver a consistent, diverse curriculum and range of resources that could speak to the different students no matter where they were coming from.
Thank you. Speaking of diversifying the curriculum, Kate, could you talk about building on that a little bit? Could you talk about how institutions can ensure course materials reflect diverse perspectives, experiences, and voices from different backgrounds?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is really important. I think it's almost a very similar answer to that previous question as well, in terms of how you develop your online content and also your face-to-face content. I think one of the key issues, I mean, for me, is around staff training. I mean, obviously access and technical access and overcoming the technical barriers to that access are key things. But I think we all need to perhaps go back to our learning outcomes, and we need to say, okay, we have in front of us, whether they're international students or home students or online, we have a very diverse cohort. Everyone is an individual with their own experiences, educational background and insights and so on. And so what that means is, I think, going into teaching with perhaps a slightly different way of thinking about it. So almost going back to first principles and saying, okay, so we might have a diversity of modalities there. So you're going to be perhaps delivering content in a range of different ways. That might mean abandoning traditional approaches, perhaps adopting more blended learning, for example. And then by doing that, obviously you enable that modality of different content so people can engage with it in different ways. I mean, I think also picking on what we were saying earlier about co-design with students, I think thinking about how that can be integrated, no matter what kind of teaching you're doing and the modality you're using, how can you get that constant feedback, get that sense of co-design in terms of the curriculum, in terms of the activities, in terms of designing the things you do in the online or face-to-face classroom that actually encourage collaboration, encourage co-design, encourage different voices to be heard. And obviously, in order to make that happen, you need to make sure that your spaces, so digital or classrooms, physical spaces, they're places of trust and confidence, that people feel that they are able to express their identities, their true authentic selves, if you like, in those spaces. And obviously that's challenging and it needs work. It's not something that happens on its own. And so that idea of social presence, that idea of in the online space, being really proactive as an educator, but also saying to everyone in that learning community, to make this work, everyone has to be proactive in this space. And that means contributing, engaging in different ways. And when that happens, you get that trust building up. And then people can start to share and feel happy to share into that space. And then obviously the learning experience goes up for everyone then. So I think it is a question of going back and really consciously going back to the beginning and saying, okay, how can I do what I do in the online space in terms of teaching or in the classroom? I've got this diverse group in front of me. What can I do to cater for that, both in how I'm delivering, but also the kinds of things I'm delivering, so those activities.
Thank you. Delving deeper into that, and we also mentioned student feedback and involvement earlier. So what role do ongoing feedback and evaluation play in refining online course delivery and ensuring that it meets the needs and expectations of students? Annabella, do you have any insights that you can share with us? Sorry, you're on mute.
I was just going to pick up on Kate's point, just really around the, I think the asynchronous piece works for so many, but it's important to get that balance right where possible in terms of hybrid delivery. And equally important is the quality of the student experience and really tapping into that and engaging with students. It's incredibly important to have the academic support services available to students as you would in an in-person setting. And I suppose for us, it's been huge to get that feedback from students. I think that's the only way we know, the only measure that we're doing well is really to tap into students, to really get a sense of that student voice, what their actual experience is on the ground. And I think also being clear about what's possible and realistic about what's not. So some things, being very clear about what services are available to students and what services aren't, I think is equally important, So having an appropriate support structure to support the learning experience, I think is very important, and to work in partnership between academic and professional support staff, really to make it very clear, even on program pages and learning materials, how they can tap in to supports and how they can provide feedback.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. But could you also talk just more about the challenges or barriers in implementing those structures?
Well, as I said, I think part of it is that the experience of an online student is quite different to an in-person student. And it isn't as simple as, in terms of drop-in. So I think that for universities, I think we really need to think about stand back, put ourselves in the shoes of a student and really listen to that student voice in terms of how we model what it is that we're trying to achieve, We've done a bit of work in this space. And then we've had to kind of step back and say, what is possible? What isn't possible? Do we need to be more flexible? Do we need to, just in terms of time issues, so the time difference, making some advice available, out of hours, how are we going to do that? You know, we've really had to look at that model of delivering. But I think you need to acknowledge as well, it's hugely resource intensive. So you have to have the appropriate supports in place to do that. And I suppose university backing around that, I think is huge, you know.
Mhm. Thank you. I would like to ask the panel to talk a little more about that. How can universities provide faculty members with support to adapt to online teaching environments and provide consistent quality of education to international students both within and outside the UK? Would anyone like to jump in there?
Yeah,
Well,
I'll come in. Oh,
Okay.
Tom, go ahead.
Okay. I was just going to say, one initiative we've got here is I think we call it a digital mindset project. So it's really about upskilling staff and using, taking examples of best practice and sharing them, so that there's, we've got pockets of really good practice here, but it's patchy. So it's trying to make sure that the staff feel like they've got the right skills and are confident in the space and able to deliver in that environment. We don't have a huge offering of online learning at the moment. We are looking to grow it. So it's an area we really want to build and make sure that our staff are as comfortable teaching online as they are in the classroom, and that blended experience, works for all the students. And that's about making sure that the staff are confident with the tools they've got and have got the right skills. So that's a kind of a program that we're going through at the moment, is just evaluating that and looking to put some training in place for staff across the institution.
Thank you. Kate, please go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just to follow up on what Tom was saying, really, I mean, online education done well is really different from face-to-face education. For all the reasons we've actually just been talking about here. We've mentioned time differences. We mentioned challenges around technical engagement, around conceptual differences, around how you engage. There's likely to be a lot more asynchronous content to cope with a lot of those challenges. And it's something, in my experience over many years, is that doesn't come naturally to a lot of educators. And so that training is essential. So at Southampton, obviously, we have a programme of open online courses, and we have a couple of degree programmes that are online. And we're obviously expanding that area at the moment. But I think we have a very clear understanding, because through our MOOC programme, that our open online courses are created as a collaboration. And so we have a digital learning team with experts in media creation and learning design, and they work very closely with the academic, if you like, creating the online course. And it's very much a collaboration. All of that expertise is essential. And it's very much understood that this is a new thing that's being created, because it needs to be entirely suitable for a globally located audience, accessing at different times, perhaps in different ways, perhaps at times when their Wi-Fi comes and goes. And so perhaps resources need to be downloadable at certain times, and so there is a lot of training needed through that process. So working collaboratively with experts you might have in your institution in particular areas, but also training in terms of how you reconceive your teaching in order to deliver it in an online space. I think, COVID, a lot of us coped with that really well, jumping online. And there were various things in place to make sure the quality was in the right space at different institutions, including at Southampton. But I think a lot of it was emergency teaching. And there wasn't time to grapple with, I think, what happens in that space really effectively. But now we're in that space where we can think about that. And I think we do need to acknowledge that it is an extra way of thinking, an extra workload perhaps on staff who are used to teaching in the classroom. And training is really, really necessary in order to do it really well. And doing it well means getting those students engaged, means responding, making it accessible content, making it inclusive, and all of those things. Because for me, those things come in with online education automatically. If you're doing it well, you're bringing all those things in. And actually, I find from our open online course programme is that educators that have worked in creating an open online course often import the learnings into their face-to-face classroom. It affects their face-to-face practice. And so that process of having to think through quite a detailed learning design, which thinks, how am I engaging with all these people and in what ways, actually has a really positive impact on people in terms of their pedagogical kind of profile anyway. So yes, the training, I think, is absolutely essential to do it well.
Thank you. I would like to quickly touch on personalized learning and personalized support, which also falls into the gamut of digital education offerings. How can universities offer personalized academic and well-being support for international students, especially in the context of online and hybrid learning? Annabella, could I come to you on this?
And it's interesting that you asked me this question, because I was just thinking about how we support staff to support students who are studying online. I think that's probably one of the challenges for us. We've been engaging in a series of training for staff around a Care and Connect initiative that we've rolled out across the university to really support staff around the use of language, well-being language, and things to look out for in terms of students who might be experiencing distress. But it's something that I think we need to be mindful of while we may be teaching and we may be engaging with staff and working with colleagues. We have a MOOC, a Digital Edge MOOC as well for online learners, and great capacity to deliver. I think that challenge is delivering those one-to-one supports and really empowering staff to be able to have the language of well-being, not asking them to be counsellors, but giving them enough skills to be able to deal with situations should they arise, That's just something that we've been looking specifically at, and we've rolled out a lot of training around this to the in-person, and I suspect the online piece is going to be just as engaging really with colleagues, I don't know, in terms of the one-to-one piece and that bespoke, I think our experience from COVID times really was, we put a huge focus on well-being. We had a Discover Wellbeing program as part of our orientation and onboarding. And students really appreciated that well-being was something that we really, we placed a great emphasis on. And that early signposting, that 24/7 access, so they might not engage with all the material right at the onboarding stage, but we give them that lens to look at things. So we also have a hub that is themed from healthy choices to mental health to academic confidence. So all of these range of areas that we know are going to be challenging in terms of the student experience. So, I think that's hugely important, being able to bring all those things together to allow for students to see themselves and all the issues that they may encounter, but that they can tap into at that moment when they need it, I don't know if that answers your question, but
Yes, thank you. Kate, could I quickly come back to you, especially when you're designing online open courses? How do you factor in well-being support and academic support features into the course design?
Well, I would say it doesn't, because of the nature of an open online course. The nature of an open online course, obviously, is it's open and you don't know who's going to sign up for it. Obviously, there are rules of engagement. Obviously, we work with FutureLearn, which has its own code of practice and code of conduct. And so those are things that any learner engaging on any of the courses would sign up to. We would also kind of set the tone for the learning design in the sense of it being an inclusive, sharing kind of space, put it engaging in community building kind of activities. We have facilitators who obviously are trained in terms of how they're engaging and getting conversations going. There's a moderation process, which facilitators would be aware of, but also can be automatically implemented via FutureLearn. But I wouldn't say we implement, aside from an inclusive design and aside from attempting to make a welcoming community space, we don't necessarily consider wellbeing approaches in our open online courses. I just wanted to mention, I was listening to Annabella there. Just wanted to mention an example of where we have a course. It's in our business school, and it's for international students, and it's a kind of it's a blended course, and it runs through their entire time of their studies with us as a support course. And it consists of a mixture of online resources, but also, through our VLE, online resources, but also one-to-one, the possibility for one-to-one in-person or online meetings, focus groups. So it's entirely blended, and it entirely integrates with the work in the business school. And so it features colleagues from the business school and colleagues from our Academic Centre for International Students. And it's very collaborative and integrated in terms of the content. It works with that particular discipline. And what's really nice about it is it makes students feel really at home, both in the business school and in the university, responds to their particular needs, but not in a way that sort of takes them out of their department. It's very much an integrated kind of model that has grown kind of year on year. And so I think that has a tremendous impact, I think, on the well-being of our international students that are studying in the business school, because they have that constant kind of support all around them and integrated in terms of what they're doing for their content discipline. It's a model that works really nicely for us.
Thank you. Please go ahead, Catherine.
I think that's really interesting. It's quite often we hear that students aren't necessarily going to self-disclose any sort of mental well-being support that they might need, and providing that sort of that support built into their course, so it's not pushing students to go and ask for support in particular areas, but actually just providing them with resources that can help them, can support them, and then also, you know, having that option to be able to go and seek further support. It's really interesting. Yeah, it's an area as well. We work with institutions too in that area in terms of the type of content that students can access, but you hear a lot around institutions, how they can actually support potentially the scale of support that they're needing to offer, and the challenges that can have on institutions.
Thank you, Catherine. We're drawing near to the end of our conversation today. I'll ask you, Catherine, talking about the role of a strong digital education offering. Could you talk about some of the core components universities should prioritize while designing the digital education offerings that are perhaps overlooked at the moment, but can make these more effective and more accessible for students?
Sure. Yeah, I think some of the points that we've just touched on around the sort of the mental wellbeing support. I think also going into employability, which I know we haven't sort of touched on that much, but actually how you can support students with sort of embedding that, like Kate was mentioning around the mental wellbeing, embedding that into the curriculum. How can you embed that sort of employability strain? I know from talking to lots of institutions, this is what we're starting to do. You can start to see this. I think particularly you can see how this could support international students as well. But I think with a lot of the things that we've talked about, there's particular issues around international students, but quite often actually it's relevant for all students. If we're thinking around sort of the inclusive resources, having a diversity of voice represented in the resources that are being used, making sure that everything's accessible, that it's taking away those barriers to be able to access and enter and access that content. And then sort of that strain of supporting them in terms of the mental well-being and preparing them to be successful in a challenging graduate job market.
Thank you. We're almost out of time, but Annabella, can I quickly ask you to share your thoughts on this too?
So just to say, I'm just mindful of it. When I was talking about this central database that we have, or hub we have, we've opened up, so we've curated a lot of content there for colleagues, so not just for students. So we've actually given resources and courses, internal and external content available, with instructions for academic colleagues and professional services colleagues about how they might want to include some of this content. And I think that's hugely important, is having a really good bank and drawing on. So we don't have internally, we don't have resources available that we look externally to see what we can do and take responsibility for the curating of that. I think is hugely important, and support each other to support students.
Thank you. That brings us to the end of our session today. Thank you to our panelists for making this an interesting discussion. And thank you to our audience for joining us today and contributing to the discussion. A recording of this webinar will be available on the THE Connect YouTube channel in the coming days. Do keep an eye out for that. Thank you, everyone, and goodbye.